Hello and welcome to Hard Edge. So today's video is about why you should want to be technical. I had a message from one of our students. He's taking our game art introduction course at the moment, and he said to me, the videos are really quiet. And this is the second time I've heard this. Now, I've checked the videos, I listened on my computer, and we record with fairly good equipment, and it sounds fine. Like, it sounds okay. I don't think it needs to be louder, but since it's the second student who has said something in, a relatively short amount of time, I thought I'd fix it. And I thought, oh, is it a one-off? Is it every video? So then I started looking at all of our videos and they basically all sound the same, which is a problem because we've got for the videos over like 50, 60 videos, for example, that I would need to edit. And if you can imagine trying to rebalance the audio, or at least just go, hey, I want it to be 50% louder or 100% louder, 20% louder, I'd have to go into, Premiere or Camtasia or whatever and just like up the volume on each individual one, which would be extremely painful, right? You don't want to do that. And so, because I'm technical and I can program and I can do things like that, I thought of something. I thought, oh, you know what? There's this command line tool I can use called ffmpeg, and I teach my students how to use it when I teach them about Python and stuff. That's wasn't the first things we do when we teach Python is we use ffmpeg. It's an incredibly powerful library to help you with video and audio encoding and all kinds of stuff. It can do so many cool things. And I thought, you know what? I'm sure I could build a really, really simple script in Python that leverages ffmpeg and just goes through and blasts through all of the videos, changes their volume, and then I can just go, manually and upload them on Vimeo, right? So at least it's not like painful. It's like 60 clicks instead of however many clicks it would be to, load the video, export the video, put it in the right folder, find it, it'd be a nightmare, right? So to set the stage, I want to at least show how I am set up. And the first thing I have is I have ffmpeg installed, and you just download it off the internet. You'll unzip it and it'll be called like ffmpeg and a bunch of version names and stuff like that. I just renamed it to ffmpeg, and then I chucked that folder straight into my C drive. And then this area here, the binaries folder is where the actual program lives. What I've done there is I've added this to the environment variables of my computer, which basically says, hey, this is a shortcut. That means I can type in ffmpeg in the command line and it will know to run that specific exe. And also, I have Python installed because I do a lot of Python coding here and there, especially when I teach my tech artists. And well, it also is added to the path environment variable. And you can do this in your installation like so, if you haven't got Python installed, or you can manually do it. And this is what it looks like, depending on which Python version you have installed. I think I've got 3.14, 3.11. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so the problem we have to solve is I've got to look at a directory. I've got to list all of the MP4 files. There might be other different files there, so I got to be a bit careful with that. I don't want to try and run things on things that aren't videos. So I've got to find all the MP4 files in a folder. I've got to send a command to ffmpeg to say, hey, keep everything the same, but just pump the volume up by 20%, 30%, 40%, something like that. And this is something that's actually really easy to do when you think about it, if you have any experience with Python. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'll load up my IDE, which I'll just use Sublime Text for now. And what we can do is we can just sketch this out together, and I can show you with a few lines of code how I can take something that would take hours. Can you imagine the nightmare that it would be to take, hundreds of videos and just adjust the audio, right? It'd be really, really crazy. So let me bring you along with me while I build this script, and you can see why learning how to program, learning how your computer works, understanding a little bit about environment variables and, a little bit of code is a really powerful thing, and it will save you loads of time. So what I have here is like a demo folder, meaning these videos are fine, but I want to show you if I needed to change the volume on all of these, that I don't need to sort of do anything manual aside from a little bit of an automation, right? So this is where my little experiment is going to happen. The first thing we need is a Python script. So we can do this really easily. If you don't have the options to show file extensions, make sure that you do have that on there right now. And let's just do new file. And we'll do a text document. And what we can do here is we can say something along the lines of adjust volume. I'll just do something like that. Adjust volume script, right? And I'm gonna take the extension away and finish it with .py. And this will give me a little warning and say, hey, this will make the file unusable. It's like, I'm just making it into a Python file. Did you know you could do that? You can do that, right? It doesn't have to be a text file. It can just be a Python file. So I've got Sublime Text loaded up here behind me, and we can start doing some things. What can we do? The first thing that I need is I need to decide how I'm going to run this script. Now, this isn't going to be some crazy tool that I need to, commercialize or whatever. This is just something to save me time. I don't need to make it crazy. I'm not going to make it crazy. I'm literally going to take this script, I'm going to copy it, or move it from folder to folder and run it in that folder. I don't need to make it any more complicated than that. So the first thing we need is we need to get the folder that we're at now. And so what I'll do is I'll show you how I normally teach people Python, which is I do it in very stepped ways. And then I'll show you like the final code that I used to run this, which was, I think, like 4 lines of code or 5 lines of code or something like that. Maybe it was a bit more than that. It was very few lines of code, but I'll show you this the manual way. So if you already know how to code, great, use your own IDE, or if you're just watching for curiosity's sake, you don't need to really do anything. But for me, I have specifically built what we call a build system in Sublime so I can run it off of the Python that I installed. I install my Python in this way because that's how I like to work. It works for what I need to do. To each their own. So I did build this this sort of build system here. It's very simple. You can copy it if you like. If you have never set up Sublime in your life and you want to do something like that, all you need to do is give it the location of your Python executable, and it should be pretty much fine if you just copy what I did. The documentation for Sublime shows you how to do this as well. So that means that I can go into Tools and Build System and pick my Python 3.11, and that means I can run some code. And what code am I going to run? So I've opened up my little file here. All I did is drag it in like so, and then it opened it up. So the first thing I want to do is import the OS module, and I just want to verify where I am. And so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get the current working directory. So get current working directory. It is a function that we can use from the OS module. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print it. That's all we're going to do. So we're going to do that. I'm going to save it. I'm going to hit Control B for Bravo to run this. And you can see that it gives us the folder where we are, which is my little sort of recordings here, Python Week 1 demo folder. That's where we are. So what I want to do now is I want to sort of list all of the files in this directory, and it's very easy to do that. So we could do something like, for example, print os.list list dir for list a directory, and then we could wrap the os.get current working directory in there. Now, this isn't code that we're actually going to use right now, but it's just to sort of show you that I can verify that I can get to my videos. The most important thing right now is like, hey, I need to get to the videos. Can I get them? Yes, here they are. Cool. So what we'd like to do now is to run a command on all of these and just change their volume. Important to note is this is a list. And so if it's a list or, an array, if you're coming from a different language, we can loop through this very, very easily. So what you could do, and this would be like a super easy way and, basic way of doing this, is you could say that this is like files, file list, something like that. You can assign it a variable. And that by definition will give us everything inside of a folder. And what we can do is we can say for file in file list, like so, we can do something, right? So what we can do is we can check if it's a file, because if it's a folder, all this other stuff, we want to make sure that we don't loop over it, right? And this is a very manual and sort of, like I said, stepped way of doing this. I'll show you a much more streamlined way, but it requires a lot more knowledge about computers and patterns and a few other things from Python that are, how you traditionally should be using um, strings and paths and things like that, because I use the pathlib library for my solution. So what we can do here now is, first of all, check, is it a file? Because if it's a folder, I don't want to do anything. So we can do, I believe it's os.path.isFile, I believe, and we can check it here. And we can say, if not os.isPath file, is it a file? What we can do is we can say continue. I don't want you to do anything, just skip. And this is a good pattern to have because you're early exiting. Don't do things unless you have everything you need. Just skip over it. Like, that's the most important thing. I think this is the right function. If not, I'll Google it, but we'll see. Otherwise, we can just say print file, and we can make it like an F string, like so. This is why I like Sublime, is a file, for example, something like this, right? So if I run this code, you'll see that installation MP4 is a file, this is a file, this is a file, so we're good to go. Now the problem here is that we don't know if these files are MP4s. Like, I obviously know they are, but what if I have other data in my video folder, like metadata, some scripts, some images, a bunch of other stuff? Like, what if you keep all your videos and your sort of Premiere project or Final Cut project all in one location? Like, I don't know how your stuff is. I know how my stuff is. My stuff is fairly simple, but because I'm not a big video editor, I just kind of do things in a few takes and there I go. So I need to check if these things are MP4s. So in order to do that, I can do something a little bit interesting. So because these are strings that I'm dealing with, I can go file. So this is a string, right? So what we have down here is a string data type. So we can split this. So we can do dot split, and we can split it at the dot. Now, if you have multiple dots in your file name, this is very fallible, right? Like, this is important to know. So if you want it to not be fallible, what you have to do is grab the last thing that would have a dot, which would be the file extension. So this is me doing that because the file.split will give you a list, and it will kind of split whatever the dots have before them into this little sections. So I want the last thing that will give me the file extension. And then I have to go and I say, well, okay, this is like extension. So I'm storing that in a variable as we loop. And we can say, if extension equals to MP4, which I think it would be like that, we can say print, and we'll do the same thing with an F string like this. So file is a video, right? Or is a MP4 file, something like that. So if I run this code now, you can see it's saying that, the installation MP4 is an MP4 file. We know that it is, but this would filter out anything else. And this is very manual, but it works. It's fine. Like, why do you need it to be super complicated? Why do you need to be like, well, I'll make it in 2 lines of code and say, it's like the Jack Sparrow meme, it's the worst code I've ever run, but it runs, right? So we have everything we need. I now have these files, and this is exactly what I need to give to ffmpeg. So now what we need to discover is, how do we change the volume on something using ffmpeg? So let me do some Googling, and I'll find you a screenshot from the documentation, and I'll show you the command that we need to use. Okay, so I found this command online, which is very useful. It says run ffmpeg, ffmpeg.exe. It's in our environment variable, so it'll know what to find. Use a video as an input file, so we're going to give it that file when we're looping. As far as the video codec goes, just copy whatever is out there, don't mess with it. Apply an audio filter of adjusting the volume. In this case, 10 decibels, as far as I understand, is I don't know that this would change anything, or it would be increase it by 100% volume, and then write that to an output file. So you can do something different here where you could do like 1.5, and then you've done it by 50%, 1.2 by 20%, so on and so forth. And that's what I'm going to do. So I came up with this command here, which you can see. And the important thing is that I just have like an extra, like the only difference I have is I'm saying the audio codec that I want to use is AAC, and I'm changing, instead of using decibels, I'm using just like the percentage. So 1.2 is 20% volume. So what we need to do now is we need to run ffmpeg. We need to run this command. And so in order to do that, we need to use sub process. So we import sub process, and then we do sub process.run. And we need to pass it a command. And this command is going to be a list of strings of what you're going to run. And then you can do check equals true, or you cannot do that, so that it can return an error code, so you can catch an exception if something goes wrong, for example. So what we need is we need basically to wrap all of these things into like a bunch of strings like this. So that's the main thing we need to do. So I'm going to go do that now, and I'll come back in a second. Okay, here we go. So I've separated it all into its own little string situation here. So every one of these is the same as me typing that in the command line one after the other with a space. So this one is the first is like the program you're going to run, you know, then you give it the input file, so on and so forth. So in this case, what we want actually is we want to say that this is an F string, and we want to take the actual file because that's what we want to modify. So we do something a little bit like that, and that should work okay. Now the problem is we need to like modify this file name to like say something like louder or whatever. So what I can do is, instead of splitting the file like this, I could say that this is like split file name, for example, and I can instead get the last index of that list that it would return, because remember, if you split something, it would give you like all of the pieces of the string. And then what we could do is, if it is an MP4 file, great, we need to build this command and do the thing. So the output file name we can mess around with. So we could even do it, we could do it here kind of. So I think we could do it here anyway. So we could say that the split file name 0 is like, you know, it'll be O1 introduction, whatever it is. Then we can say louder, like this. Actually, I would need to move this away from that. So it'd be something like this, louder. And then you could add a dot and say that this is split file name and give it the extension. Now it looks really complicated, right? But all we're doing is we're sort of taking the file name, taking the extension, and then just chucking something in between there. And the really cool thing about F strings is that this is really easy to do. And then I think, you know, this is hard coding it to 1.2 volume. We can do 1.5. Like it really, you could make this a variable as well, right? So you could like very easily decide or wrap this into a function. I don't care. I just want to like up it by a specific amount. And then I just want to run it and see what happens, which I think will work. And there we go. So now, as you can see, it's running. It's running. It's creating the installation louder file, and it's going to go through and do that for loads and loads of frames and move on to the next video. There you go. It's finished one video. It's doing the next video, and there we go. Super quick, super easy, and I can run this on any folder that I like, and I can adjust the volume, and it works great. So there you go. You know, obviously there's a lot of inherent knowledge that I have to be able to build this script, right? Like I've done loads of string manipulation in my life. I've done loads of list, you know, editing and modifying in my life. So I understand how to get to these sorts of results because I've had to do, I've built a lot of pipelines for game companies. You mess around a lot with files and extensions and verifying things and etc. And so, I guess in this particular instance, 16 lines of code, we built something that will batch process all of my content. And you see it's already done, which is awesome. And these are not small videos, by the way. They're like 150 megs. That's how quick ffmpeg is. And it's really, really cool. So what I'll do now is I'll show you the actual code that I did before this, just to run it on my other machine. It was on my wife's machine because she's building our art content, and I'll explain to you the differences and why I think it's a bit cleaner, a bit nicer, but it really isn't that big of a deal. Okay, so this is the code that I actually used. It's really, really simple. It just creates a function called boost volume that takes an input file, an output file, and a desired volume that you wish to modify. By default, you're doubling the volume on anything that you give this. We do the command the same way we did before with an input file. The main difference is that I allow gain to be an extra variable via an f string here, and the output file is just another string. So we need to assemble the output file separately. And it's really easy. We just do a for loop for all videos in path os.get current working directory. So this is basically saying, hey, in the current working directory, take every file and create a path object out of it, because it uses the pathlib library, which is what I really recommend you do if you're messing with files and anything like that with Python. Like, it's the best library to be using, in my opinion. It's just really useful. But then what I do, and this is why it's a little bit more advanced, I just do the filtering with a glob. And a glob is really basic. So a glob is something you can do in your computer just by doing star.mp4, for example. It'll give you all the MP4s, and then it hides my little Sublime text file, right? So this is just my way of filtering everything with built-in functionality, which is really useful with glob. And if you want to know more about glob, go look it up. It's a really interesting thing. And so we then call the function, convert the path object into a string, because we need that for the ffmpeg command. Like, this needs to be a string. And then we do this video, we convert it to a string. We take the video with the stem. Now the path object stem is very specific. I'll show you that in a second. So as you can see here in the path library, the stem is basically the path without the sort of the suffix specifically. So if it's called library.tar, or in our case .mp4, it would just become library. So we're just taking the file name effectively, and we're saying, hey, I'd like the file name here to it looks a bit complicated, so I'll try and break it down. So the first thing that will happen is it'll resolve this parentheses, right? So the video.stem is the name of the video without the extension. We then add louder to it, so it becomes O1 introduction underscore louder. Then we add the stem. So we grab the MP4 here and add it to the end with this with stem here. And that's how we sort of complete this path. The thing about the path library that you should know about is that it's really useful because it can deal with different operating systems. Like, it doesn't have to, it makes your code that deals with file paths kind of operating system agnostic. It's the most powerful part of that, in my opinion. It just makes it really useful. So Linux, Mac, Windows, you can use the same code and it'll do the thing, which is really good. So yeah, you can run this, and then as you can see, it'll start doing the thing. So I hope that was useful. I hope that was interesting. It's something I literally had to do. And as a technical artist, someone that works in the games industry, I learned coding to be able to facilitate things like this. And so if you can imagine the headache of having hundreds of files that you've realized, oh my God, the volume is a little bit too low, you can fix it in seconds with a little bit of work and a little bit of knowledge. You should want to become technical. And if you do, and you're looking to learn with us, drop us a line. We're taking students in all the time, and we're here to help. So thank you so much for watching, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.